Today, the Vatican released its document, Dignitas Infinita, the infinite dignity, and as the name implies, it's pretty darn cool. Welcome to Intermarifica, New Mexico, the channel where we look at questions wonder from the perspectives of faith and reason, philosophy and theology. I'm your host, Daniel Kelly, and today I just wanted to talk a little bit about the document Dignitas Infinita, the infinite dignity of the holy person, of any person, not just holy people, that the Vatican released today. I really like this document, and I'm sure I'm going to have more insights as I read it more and more, but I just, in case you didn't get a chance to see it or didn't know that it was coming out or wasn't aware of it, I want to give you some just highlights from it that I really thought was important. So this document, in its preamble, what it says, first of all, is it describes how it was made, and it took forever. They kept wanting to release it, but different stuff kept happening, and I think for a lot important documents that happens quite a bit, and that's interesting. But I might make a video on that later, but not right now. And so the whole theme of this is Pope Francis, one of his themes he talks about is how people have this infinite dignity that regardless of circumstance, regardless of anything, they have this dignity. And that's kind of the theme of this document, talking about defending the dignity of the human person against all these attacks that are coming against it, or reiterating it. Even if there's no attacks, we still need to reiterate it. But there are attacks. But we need to reiterate that infinite dignity of the human person. And it talks about some of the things that overall it talks about is like, it makes explicit some of the things that the Second Vatican Council kind of hinted at with the three sources of dignity. We have dignity because, we're made by God. We have dignity because we're redeemed by Christ. And we have dignity because we have a vocation, as the document calls it, to dignity, where we're going to be with God forever. So we grow into that third dignity. Everybody has those first two dignities. We grow into that third one. And it talks about different types of dignity where we have to make these distinctions where it's like, hey, there's ways you can lose dignity in these different ways where you're undignified. But the most fundamental source of dignity, the ontological dignity, the dignity of being, being a child of God made in his image and likeness, that's the most important. And it talks about all these different types of dignity in sections 7 through 9. I like how when it's talking about us being the imago Dei, right, the image of God, it combines these two things that have been from the tradition that are sometimes put at odds with each other. One thing is we're placed as the image of God. It's very obvious in the garden. God makes us his image, his representative. We're representative of the king, right? That's what it means to be in his image and likeness. But then a lot of the early Christians will talk about how we're made in his image, but we grow into his likeness. Even though that's probably not what the author of Genesis meant by it. He meant that we're representative of God, and that's what he was talking about, the author of Genesis. But it combines those two strands to describe our dignity, that we're representative of God. God is the king, and the king sends forth his representative, and in that way we're the image of God. That's what the imago Dei means. But then we also are called to grow into his likeness. I like how in talking, this is in section 11, in talking about the imago Dei, the image of God, it says, in their relationship of equality and mutual love, both the man and the woman represent God in the world, and are also called to cherish and nurture the world. I love that, because as God's representatives, we're not supposed to be like representatives of a tyrant, because God's not a tyrant. We're representatives of love. So that's amazing. It says, because of this, to be created in the image of God means to possess a sacred value that transcends every distinction of a sexual, social, political, cultural, and religious nature, right? So we have dignity no matter what. And I love that. And this whole section, I'm not going to go through the whole thing. This whole section is super good. One thing I like about this document is it has stuff that we're going to get into some later. It has stuff that's going to make us, no matter if we're left, we're right, we're whatever worldview we have, that's going to make us uncomfortable, and I think that's a good thing. So one of the things, for example, that talks about that makes me a little uncomfortable, where it's very optimistic that we're not going to have wars anymore, and that we need to not have wars, and there has to be other ways to solve problems. And that's great. We should have other ways to solve problems, but then you also have the right to defend yourself, which it does talk about. But so it's got those parts, and I think anything that is really defending a truth we all have these different broken parts in our hearts, so it's going to rub us raw different ways. If it's giving a whole picture, everybody's going to be rubbed raw a little bit, but I think this document gives a really, really good overall view. Another cornerstone that it refers to is the Universal Declaration of Human Rights from 1948 that says and Pope John Paul II talked about this too, that it's just a monument of human progress, and it refers to it as a touchstone over and over. So those are some of the overall broad things about this document, but some of the more specific parts I wanted to read to you and share with you would be where it gets into the parts where it's actually talking to specific attacks on human dignity. Section 24 I really like, where unconditional respect for human dignity, where it's talking about unborn children. It's almost like this section is so good. I love Trent Horn, the apologist who defends life. This is talking, it's like as if Trent Horn wrote it, about where these people are trying to say that people only have dignity when they become persons or they get through this different stages and stuff. And it's like, no. It says, only by recognizing an intrinsic and inalienable dignity in every human being can we guarantee a secure and inviolable foundation of that quality. Without any ontological grounding, that means in the very being, the recognition of human dignity would vacillate at the mercy of varying and arbitrary judgments. I think that's so important. If it's not just in being human that we have dignity, then we're at the mercy of just whatever. So that whole section is long, but it's really, really good. I like then in section 25 how it says, the concept of human dignity is occasionally misused to justify an arbitrary proliferation of new rights, many of which are at odds with those originally defined in that original Declaration of Human Rights. So they're saying these new rights, so-called, that we say we have, are often set in opposition to the fundamental right to life. Okay, it is as if the ability to express and realize every individual preference or subjective desire should be guaranteed. This perspective identifies dignity with an isolated and individualistic freedom that claims to impose particular subjective desires and propensities as rights to be guaranteed and funded by the community. And say, no, this individualistic subjective foundation for human rights is ridiculous. It's nonsense. Because it goes on to say in section 27, human dignity, I love this. This is a super short section, but it's amazing. I'll read the whole thing. Human dignity also encompasses the capacity inherent in human nature to assume obligation vis-a-vis others, right? So our dignity is tied up with our obligations towards other people. I think that's really important. Section 28 talks about how because of our dignity, we do have a certain dignity that's above other created things, but because of that, we have a certain obligation to recognize the dignity inherent in all creatures, in animals, all created things, right? So that's a long section, but it also is really good. I want to skip down to section, and this is it's a very short document. It's only 60-some paragraphs, 66, I think. And then in section 30, it talks about how freedom is different than the way we sometimes think of it. So I'm going to read some parts from that. He says, it would be a grave error to think that by distancing ourselves from God and his assistance, we could somehow be freer and feel more dignified. Instead, detached from the Creator, our freedom can only weaken and become obscured. The same happens if freedom imagines itself to be independent of any external reference and perceives any relationship with prior truth as a threat. Right? So if we step out of the created order, we're just going to be our own thing, and we're stepping out. That's how, as he talks about, as wisdom talks about, that's making a covenant with death, right? The book of wisdom. So when we think we're going to be more free by stepping out of created bounds, no, we enslave ourselves. And it goes on, and it's just super good, super powerful. Another section I wanted to highlight really quick is the section on abortion, section 47. Really long section, but really, really good. It says the Church consistently reminds us that the dignity of every human being has an intrinsic character and is valid from the moment of conception until natural death. It is precisely the affirmation of such dignity that is the inalienable prerequisite for the protection of a personal and social existence. Also the necessary condition for fraternity and social friendship to be realized among all the peoples of the earth. Right? If we have abortion, we're not going to have fraternity. We're not going to have any of our other rights. It goes on. It talks a lot more. But it's just really, really good. It has a really good section on surrogacy. Sections 48 through 50 just talks about it in such a pastoral, loving way, but saying, no, look, surrogacy is just, it's just no good. We can't have it. Like what it says in section 50, surrogacy violates the dignity of the woman, whether she is coerced into it or chooses to subject herself to it freely. For in this practice, the woman is detached from the child growing in her and becomes a mere means subservient to the arbitrary gain or desire of others. Whoa, so powerful. Then in sections 55 through 59, it talks about that there's all these kind of issues with gender theory, and that part is just really, really good. I like in section, this is a huge section, I'm not going to be able to read all of it, but in section 56, it talks about, again, how Pope Francis has consistently reiterated this is the ideological colonization that's going on right now, where we're colonizing through this kind of ideology. So it talks about that. In section 57, it talks about how this temptation that we're in the modern era to just, I'm whatever I make myself to be, that's the same temptation we had in the garden, to make ourselves God, okay? And it says that's what we're doing in the modern era, and it's really true. And I love this section. Section 58 is so powerful. A prominent aspect of this theory is that it intends to deny the greatest possible difference that exists between living beings. Sexual difference. Whoa. Boom. Blew my mind. I want to talk about this more. This section I'm going to make a whole video on. But this foundational difference is not only the greatest imaginable difference in creation, that's the greatest imaginable difference, but is also the most beautiful and most powerful of them. In the male-female couple, this difference achieves the most marvelous of reciprocities. It thus becomes the source of that miracle that never ceases to surprise us, the arrival of new human beings in the world. This is just the most powerful thing ever, this section 58, and I'm going to talk about more. It's really cool. It talks about how this is an attack at the most basic unit of society, which is the family. It's attacking the family. That's what it's trying to do. So that's just that's in section 59 where it talks about family. So there's all kinds of good things, but moving on at the end, near the end, so it's 66 sections long, and section 64 I think kind of gives a whole theme, reiterates the whole theme, so I wanted to end with that. In this spirit, the Church, with the present declaration, ardently urges that respect for the dignity of the human person, beyond all circumstances, be placed at the center of the commitment to the common good, and at the center of every legal system. Indeed, respect for the dignity of each person is the indispensable basis for the existence of any society that claims to be founded on just law, and not the force of power. Acknowledging human dignity forms the basis for upholding fundamental human rights, which precede and ground all civic coexistence. So that's really powerful. This whole document's really powerful. I'm going to make more videos on it, but just in case you missed it, there's some little highlights, and I hope you enjoyed that. And I want to encourage you, even if you don't want to become a supporter, go to my locals page, because I put reflections that I type out that aren't videos. I put videos too for supporters, but even if you're not a supporter, you can look at the reflections. So go check that out, and I hope this was helpful to you. You have a good day. God bless you.